In the previous chapter, Logan returns victorious after crushing the rebellion, but the king becomes jealous of his growing fame. Manipulated by Cleo, the king begins suspecting Logan of betrayal. Soon, he accuses Logan of secretly protecting surviving rebels, leaving him furious and demanding an explanation. The king repeated his statement with firm authority. He declared that he had heard the majority of the rebel army was still alive, and that all of them were now under McLean's protection. His words stunned Logan and everyone else present. The king then smiled confidently. He made it clear that this situation required a proper explanation. Logan became slightly nervous as he reflected on what had truly happened. He admitted to himself that the king's statement was completely accurate. He recalled that the moment the city walls collapsed, he had immediately located Clavis and cut off his head. The battle had ended in an extremely short time. Because the war was so brief, the enemy army suffered only a small number of casualties. As a result, most of the surviving rebel soldiers chose to surrender instead of continuing the fight. The total number of surrendered soldiers was approximately 7,000. As Logan stood before the king, memories from a few days earlier began to replay in his mind. Back then, Luther and Victor had been discussing the fate of the surrendered rebels. Luther had been surprised that such an enormous number of soldiers had surrendered all at once despite everything that had happened. Victor believed the soldiers had surrendered because they had been completely overwhelmed by Logan's incredible strength. Luther agreed that such a reaction was understandable. He pointed out that the massive defensive barrier had been destroyed with a single strike, making it obvious why the enemy had lost the will to resist. Victor then turned the discussion toward the future of the surrendered soldiers. He acknowledged that they were ordinary soldiers, but reminded everyone that they were still rebels. According to the kingdom's laws, rebels were normally sentenced to death. Luther then glanced at Logan. He emphasized that the situation involved all 7,000 surrendered soldiers, making the decision far more complicated than usual. Hearing those words, Logan looked deeply troubled. He realized that he had only two possible choices before him. One option was to break the kingdom's law. The other option was to carry out the execution of all 7,000 surrendered soldiers and commit a massive massacre. He understood that no matter which decision he made, the king would eventually use it against him to place him under political pressure. At the same time, Logan also remembered that the kingdom's military had already suffered devastating losses during the Civil War. Those losses had still not been replaced. Because of that, he questioned whether it was truly wise to throw away a force of 7,000 trained soldiers. After carefully weighing both outcomes, Logan reached a conclusion. If both choices were destined to create problems, then he would choose the path that minimized the kingdom's losses. The memory finally faded, and the scene smoothly returned to the present. The king continued looking directly at Logan, with a calm and confident smile, fully aware of the situation before him. In contrast, Logan stood there consumed by anger, his rage clearly visible as he faced the king. Logan stepped forward and explained that the rebel soldiers had realized the seriousness of their wrongdoing and had immediately switched sides. The king responded with clear disbelief. He questioned whether all 7,000 soldiers had truly changed sides at the same time. He demanded an explanation that would be convincing enough for even the royal advisor to accept. The moment those words were spoken, both Logan and his teacher, Felix, were visibly shocked. Logan's anger continued to rise as he realized what the king was planning. He understood that the king intended to pressure him by using his own stubborn teacher against him. At that moment, Logan finally realized why the king had summoned Felix to the royal audience as well. The king then turned his attention directly toward Logan. He questioned whether Count Logan was attempting to protect the rebel soldiers. Those words only fueled Logan's anger even further. As he struggled to control his emotions, Logan kept thinking about the 7,000 surrendered soldiers. He believed that a true ruler should preserve such a valuable military force, by whatever means were necessary. Even then, Logan realized that the king seemed completely determined to pursue the matter, until the very end. For a brief moment, Felix remained completely silent as he considered the situation. After that pause, Felix acknowledged that His Majesty's argument was correct. Logan was immediately shocked by his teacher's response. Meanwhile, the king smiled with satisfaction. However, Felix continued before anyone could celebrate. He explained that if His Majesty truly wished to demonstrate the virtue of a great ruler, then this was the moment to show mercy. Logan was once again left completely stunned by his teacher's unexpected words. The king suddenly slammed his hand heavily onto the table and rose to his feet. Visibly angered, he demanded to know exactly what the royal advisor meant by those words. Felix remained calm and explained that the kingdom had only just finished suppressing the rebellion. Because the conflict had ended so recently, he feared that applying the law too harshly could create unrest throughout the kingdom. The king immediately shouted in disbelief. He could not accept the idea that punishing the rebel soldiers would somehow lead to unrest. To him, such reasoning was completely absurd. Felix calmly continued his explanation. He acknowledged that the law was absolute. However, he emphasized that the true value of the law lay in applying it wisely. For that reason, he respectfully urged His Majesty to show mercy. Hearing his teacher defend the rebels, Logan was left completely stunned. Deep inside, he admitted that he had never imagined his own teacher would stand on his side. The king's entire body trembled with rage, yet he forced himself to laugh. He repeated the word mercy with bitter sarcasm, making it clear how deeply those words angered him. His jaw tightened as he gritted his teeth, and the fury on his face became impossible to hide. Felix was visibly shaken by the king's reaction. The king then bitterly remarked that, as a powerless king, he had no real choice in the matter. He declared that he supposedly had no option but to accept the decision. Hearing those painful words, Felix became flustered and pleaded with the king not to say such things. The king then ordered both Logan and Felix to leave the room. He stated that he wished to be left alone. As they departed, the story smoothly shifted into the past. The scene revealed a much younger Rogers, quietly sitting in the room while drawing. Nearby, Rogers' father and Felix were having a serious conversation. The king told Felix that no one understood Rogers' situation better than he did. Felix calmly acknowledged that he was fully aware of it. The king explained that Rogers was safe for the time being because he was under his protection. However, he warned that this arrangement would not last forever. He feared that, before long, keeping Rogers inside that room would no longer be enough. He even admitted that they might eventually have to hide Rogers underground to ensure his safety. Confused by those words, Felix asked what the king meant. He pointed out that His Majesty was still in good health. The king gently told Felix not to think that way. He admitted that he was already growing old. Compared to him, Rogers was still far too young. Knowing that his own time would eventually come, the king made a heartfelt request. He asked Felix to protect Rogers after he was gone. Felix was completely shocked by the request. Unable to believe what he had just heard, he questioned why His Majesty would say something like that. At that moment, the young Rogers happily walked over to Felix while holding his drawing. With an innocent smile, he proudly showed the picture to him. Felix looked at the drawing with curiosity and asked the young prince what it was. The drawing showed a man carrying a small child in his arms. After showing the picture, Rogers smiled brightly. He proudly explained that he had drawn it himself. He then revealed that the drawing was meant to represent Felix and himself together. Seeing the innocent drawing and hearing Rogers' heartfelt words, Felix became deeply emotional. The scene then shifted back to the present. Felix quietly looked at the old drawing that Rogers had made as a child. As he stared at it, his younger daughter, Stella, walked into the room and called out to him. Felix looked up and warmly greeted Stella, telling her that she had arrived. Stella happily sat down beside her father and looked at the drawing. With innocent curiosity, she recognized it as a drawing. She then asked if the picture was of her and her father together. Felix gently shook his head. He explained that it was not. He began to say that the person in the drawing was someone else. However, before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly stopped speaking. Stella looked at him with surprise and asked what had happened. Felix lowered his head in sadness as memories of the late king's words echoed in his mind. He remembered the king's final request for him to protect that child. The thought filled Felix with sorrow. He wondered how he was supposed to protect His Majesty, now that Rogers had become the person he was today. A few days later, the scene shifted once again. Logan and Eileen were traveling together on horseback toward Tarren. As they rode, Logan continued reflecting on recent events. He admitted to himself that his teacher had removed one major burden from his mind. Even so, he still could not feel completely at ease. Noticing his expression, Eileen asked whether he was still feeling uneasy. Logan admitted that he was. He then changed the subject and apologized for making Eileen accompany him to Tarren. He especially felt guilty because her mission in the capital had only recently ended. Eileen smiled reassuringly. She told Logan that it was not a burden at all. In fact, she explained that she had wanted to come with him. She excitedly told him that Tarren had changed tremendously while he had been away in the Empire. She even warned him not to be too surprised when he finally saw it. Even after hearing that, Logan found it difficult to believe. He thought to himself that it had not even been a full year since he had left. Just then, Logan noticed something in the distance. He was visibly shocked by what he saw. He exclaimed that he could already see the farmland. To his amazement, the people were already farming. Eileen smiled proudly as she explained the reason. She told him that the dwarves had created unusual farming tools. Thanks to those tools, the land could be plowed in almost no time at all. She then pointed ahead and excitedly told Logan to look because they had arrived. Logan was surprised that the dwarves had managed to create something like that. He then wondered if the workshop was already operating as well. Eileen confirmed that it was. She explained that the workshop had already become famous among craftsmen because the treatment of the workers there was so good. Craftsmen from all over had begun gathering in Tarren. She added that Hamar's reputation was spreading farther and farther across the land. Meanwhile, two men nearby were talking among themselves. One of them said that people could learn directly from Hamar if they traveled to Tarren. The other immediately agreed, saying that everyone was heading there for that very reason. After overhearing their conversation, Logan began thinking ahead. He realized that Hamar's growing fame would require greater security. Because of that, he concluded that they would need to assign more personnel to protect Hamar. As Logan approached Tarren, the guards announced his arrival. The city gates were immediately opened to welcome him inside. The moment Logan entered, he looked around in complete amazement. He saw buildings that stood at least 3 stories tall. He also noticed that the roads had been neatly paved throughout the city. Logan could hardly believe what he was seeing. He wondered how all of this had been built in only 7 or 8 months. A proud smile appeared on his face as he thought about Hamar. Logan concluded that Hamar must have worked himself to the bone to achieve such incredible progress. He then worried that Hamar had probably not even been sleeping properly during all that time. The thought concerned him deeply. Logan believed it would be terrible if Hamar had sacrificed his health for the sake of Tarren's development. Because of that, he decided that he would properly reward Hamar when they finally met. Just then, someone came riding toward him on horseback. It was Hamar, accompanied by several of his subordinates. As soon as he arrived, Hamar warmly welcomed Logan and happily announced that his master had finally come. The sight before Logan completely caught him off guard. Instead of looking exhausted from overwork, Hamar appeared healthier than ever. He also looked wealthier, well-fed, and in excellent condition. Seeing such an unexpected transformation, Logan was left completely shocked. Unable to hide his surprise, he called out Hamar's name in disbelief. Hamar simply smiled. He warmly greeted Logan and remarked that it had been a long time since they had last met.